I already talked about using exploration encounters and skill challenges to break up the flow of combat. Don't be afraid to use it even in dungeons, right? I mean, I actually in my Monday night game, I ran an encounter the other day that was basically just one trap, right? And it was an extremely satisfying encounter because it threatened them, but it also gave them a bit of a break from the combat encounters as well. So just keep in mind that there's no location or setting that can't benefit from a pause in the action every now and then. That said, if you do create the locations, the areas within locations that have no creatures to interact with, make sure it actually serves a purpose in the adventure. I know that there's a lot of dungeons that get plagued by the empty room scenario, where the players go in there and it's like, okay, you see an empty room and there's paintings on the walls. Well, of course, the player's first reaction is, well, this has got to be here for a reason, and they start ripping down the paintings and looking for false floors and things like that. They should probably actually find something. Otherwise, it's going to feel like, well, that was a colossal waste of time. So, just keep in mind that an empty room can be an interesting encounter, especially if there's some exploration element or a trap or information to be gleaned, etc. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Variety is good, but you don't have to let it. You don't have to go crazy with the realism of okay, where's the orc's outhouse? Okay, let's put that there. That's going to be a riveting encounter, let me tell you. But if you really want the orcs to have an outhouse, make sure it's got a purpose other than, well, the purpose of an outhouse. Yes. Yeah, it's always a good idea to keep in mind that your players are looking for the loot, right? And even in this very story-driven adventure that we're building, your players are going to want their rewards. So it's a good idea to have something planned, even if it's something as simple as like, okay, you search the room and you find the chest with gold in it. It makes your players feel like they're not wasting their time. Yes. So the question is basically, what can I do to give my players rewards in an urban environment where they can't necessarily pillage and loot to their heart's content? I think the answer is that sometimes it's okay to let them pillage and loot to their heart's content, even though things are owned by other people or whatnot. D&D is sort of a kill people and take their stuff game a lot of times too. So sometimes it's okay. Now, that having been said, there's a lot of kinds of rewards that you can give your players that aren't stuff. Favors and things like that. In fact, in the Dark Sun campaign setting, we have some alternate rewards suggestions, including favor, which basically is like money, only your players can't spend it. The people they have favor with can spend it for them. That's a good way to do it because the players are getting the same net effect, but it's a little more plausible in the terms in the sense that it's not like, okay, well, we fought the corrupt mayor and then stripped his house of everything he owned, right? It's like, okay, great. You guys are earning an awesome reputation in this town. Would you like to buy the mayor's portrait? I need a new hat. Anyways, so there are ways to do it, just get the same net effect, but and I'll actually talk about rewards in a little bit more, so that may help you in a little bit. Exploration encounters, and we've talked about this a little bit, they're great for communicating story points. The adventure I was talking about earlier, where the players see the reliefs on the walls of the ancient war between law and chaos, that was used to communicate a lot of information about the Rod of Seven Parts, the dungeon, the NPCs they were going to encounter, etc. That the players would go into the rooms that would have these reliefs, and they would explore those reliefs, and an exploration encounter like that can communicate very important background information that normally you would put in like a role-playing encounter, right? Like we all have the encounter where the players go talk to the guy and he tells them, oh yes, the history of this item is XYZ. You can actually do that in exploration encounters, and it also feels a little more, it makes your players feel like they're actually learning things from their exploration. And I think that's actually a really valuable thing. It's why I try and include more exploration encounters in my adventure than I might typically, especially in like a story-driven adventure, because the players feel like they are getting the information they need without having to go through the, all right, I'm going to make a diplomacy check to talk to this guy, and I'm going to bribe this guy, and is he lying to me, etc. So it's just an alternate way of conveying information. I've already talked about pacing a little bit, so I'm not going to go too much more into it, but just keep in mind that when you're designing an adventure, you're designing it to be played, and if the players have a string of similar encounters, it can often disrupt their immersion. So keep in mind that there needs to be a little bit of variety here and there. All right, allies and NPCs. Typically, NPCs are sources of information. Sometimes they're sources of items and objects and money, but most often your players are going to be meeting NPCs and their allies in order to get some information. So one of the techniques I like to use is when I design an NPC, I just do a bulleted list that is, okay, here's what this guy knows, so that over the course of role-playing encounters, when they're interacting with those characters, I know, okay, this guy, he knows that the mayor is corrupt, but he doesn't know that the mayor is being corrupted by this artifact, and he doesn't know this. So basically, I have these guideposts that tell me exactly what this guy knows and exactly how he's going to interact with the players. So it has a lot to do with really imagining, what the NPC's role in the world is, right? The butcher doesn't necessarily know that the mayor has an artifact, right? So
I think it's generally true, or a good idea, that no one NPC has all the pieces of the puzzle.
Very good point. Allies and NPCs are they're mostly there for role-playing encounters, but they actually, they should have as much impact on the story as your villain does, right? Just like a villain needs to be proactive and reactive, allies and NPCs that you encounter need to be able to do the same. So when the players defeat the villain, one of their allies might step in to fill that void, right? It's a good idea to keep in mind that basically there are three sources of movement within a story. There's what the villain's doing, there's what the player's doing, and then there's what the NPC allies are doing as well. It helps add a little bit of depth to your adventures and a little bit more believability that the players are living in this world and acting in this world. So it's okay to let your NPCs have some impact on the way the story goes. The trick is, I think, to make sure that they don't steal the spotlight from the PCs. So don't Elminster it up. This is sort of the same point. Allies need to be able to help the heroes in some visible and tangible way. That can be conveying information, which is most of it, but they can also give out magic items or treasure. They can give them access to places that they could normally go. Some of the best and most memorable NPCs are the ones that provide services, right? The guy we go through for healing, the guy we go to for rituals being cast.
Here's an unusual example of an NPC in play. In one encounter, the characters ran across some agents of a crime syndicate in the capital city, one of whom happened to be a doppelganger, whose purpose in the crime syndicate was basically to be a double for the crime lord leader. So the crime lord leader could carry on her own affairs and basically have this doppelganger going around as her, drawing attention to itself. In the course of the encounter, the party slaughtered a bunch of them, and when faced with the true identity of the doppelganger, decided to spare its life, which the doppelganger, being sort of a neutral creature as opposed to a purely evil thing, seized upon and said, okay, you are now the biggest show in town. Since you spared my life, I'm going to return the favor for you, and I'm going to give you some information about my former boss, which proved to be actually true. And several adventures went by. The characters finally faced the real crime lord and took her down, and went back to the doppelganger later and said, look, there's a power vacuum in this city that we just created by killing this crime lord. We want you to do what you're good at and pretend to be her, but feed information to us about what's going on in the city. So they have basically used an NPC who is this throwaway duplicate guy, and now have an entire thieves guild operating in the city, feeding them information. Suddenly they got this information chain. Now they're trusting this doppelganger to do what they want him to do. Will he? Will he not? That's totally up to the DM. But that's the situation that was created.
He will. Come on, you know he will. He's totally trustworthy. Chris is just messing with me, I'm sure. I don't remember. Oh yeah, right, Leshiv. What a great name for a doppelganger, Leshiv. Anyways, so that's actually a really good example of one thing that allies and NPCs can do for players is take some of the burden of action off of the player's shoulders. It's I think some of the best allies are the ones that the players can say, okay, we need this thing to get done, but we don't have the time to do it. We got to go, raid this dungeon or something. But we really want to make sure that this, shipment of grain gets to a nearby village. You, ally, will you help us do this? And the ally does it for them. It lets them focus on what's important while still getting more done. And as you go up in levels and you get into adventures that are affecting larger and larger areas geographically, it's actually really nice to have allies and NPCs that you can send off to do things. In Chris's campaign, one of our players is sort of a sea king, basically a captain who has other captains working for him. And it's nice because now we're like, okay, we really need to get this guy to here, so I'm going to send my captain and his ship off, to deliver this guy to the place he needs to get to, and we don't have to do that, right? And it takes the burden off of the players and lets them accomplish their goals without having to play out, okay, and now here's the adventure where you escort this guy, etc. Yes? Do you? Chris, you want to talk about that?
The question is, do we consciously create allies to complement the party? Yes, sometimes, absolutely. They might almost be seen after a fashion as being kind of like secondary party members. In fact, there is a specific example of an adventure that the Monday group went on where they had basically built up an array of supporting characters who are kind of revolving around them, these sort of satellite NPCs doing odd things for them. And then things went horribly awry with the party, and they kind of fell apart, and a couple of them were killed and needed to be raised. We actually had a spin-off little one-session adventure where they played all of those satellite characters essentially coming together as a group to help the party accomplish an objective that pulled the party back together. As you recall, Bruce.
Yeah, I missed a session, and I came back and found that my head had been chopped off.
That's right. Chris is pretty hardcore about that stuff. He's like, you missed a session. No.